Hello everyone and welcome to Charleston Antique Mall. This is our next class in our free series. It's going to be on vintage cameras taught by our own very extraordinary special media social manager, Rebecca. And we ask that any dealers turn off any of their walkies. Customers, if you can turn off your cell phones, we greatly appreciate it. We thank you guys so much for coming. Our next class is going to be on vintage barware next month, so make sure you guys check that out. And any of our past classes are all up on our YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca to teach you all about vintage cameras.
All right. Thanks for showing up today, guys. So I talk a little quiet, so if you can't hear me in the back, just yell at me. Let me know you can't hear me. Okay, so let's get started. This is actually my second time teaching this class, so it's going to be kind of similar to the first time, but probably going to get into some different things this time. I'm going to hit a little bit on digital cameras because, believe it or not, those are vintage now. I know, ouch. Yeah. And then we're also going to do film cameras. Obviously, those are vintage as well. But yeah, so I'm just going to go over first the different types of cameras. If you ever want to go shopping to get an idea of what you're looking for, what fits your personality best. And then from there, we'll just talk about different film types, where to get them, where to get them developed, and then we'll just talk about how to use a camera. Has anyone used a film camera before? Has any experience? Okay, not too bad. So we're going to start off with just general things of when you're shopping for a camera, what you're going to look for. There's about 12 different types of cameras, especially when you're talking about film cameras specifically. So the first thing that I'm going to go over is point and shoot cameras. Those are the most simple cameras that you can get. An example of them would be something like this. If you ever had back in the day a disposable camera, that was pretty much a point and shoot camera. So something similar to this, the disposable types. Or, ooh, let's not drop that. All right, and then there's also these kinds of point and shoots. They're a little bit bigger. These are all film. They're all 35 millimeter film, which we'll get into that in a little bit. But those cameras do pretty much all the work for you. Those are ones that you literally just take it, point it, shoot it, you're done. The camera does all the work. You're not setting up a shot. They're good for if you're going to go to parties or something that you don't necessarily want to get super artsy with it. Now, don't get me wrong, there's definitely some that you can get really fancy with. But these are just fun, easy cameras. They usually run about $20. Some of them can go up to $200, $300. But for the most part, they're in that $20 range. Majority of them are 35 millimeters, so you can get film for them, which is great. And yeah, those are pretty basic cameras. Just going on to the digital side, we also have the digital point and shoots. So like a little baby camera like this would be a good example. And those same concept, just has a screen. That's the only difference. You can see your photo immediately. Obviously with film, you have to wait for it to get developed. And one thing about the point and shoot cameras for film is that some of them have automatic exposure, where basically it's going to advance your film for you. So you don't have to, back in the day we had these little disposable ones. You got to crank it after every single one. So some of the point and shoots don't have that. You can just take your photo, it'll automatically advance it. And how you know that it has that, a lot of the time they marketed it, and so it'll say auto on it. That's usually the number one indicator that that auto part is that automatic advancement. And at the time, that was a pretty big accomplishment for a camera to be able to just go right onto the next film for you. So they definitely marketed it a lot of the time. So that's something to look out for. And then there's also other point and shoots that are more toy camera based. So I have these two today. These would be considered point and shoots. And they just open up here. But this is more of a toy camera. Yeah, very cool display piece. They don't take the best photos, but they're very fun. So that's all that matters. And these come in so many different shapes. I mean, I have one at home. I wish I brought it today, but I have a Charlie the tuna shaped one. Yeah, they're a little impractical, but very fun to have if you're going to be displaying them. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the point and shoots. Those are very good beginner models. As we move a little bit further up, we do have some instant cameras. So these are like Polaroids. Those would be an instant camera. You can still get film for these. They're actually pretty common. You can get them at Walmart, Target, Best Buy. They sell them in like packs. They're little square packs. Most people have used a Polaroid one time or another. They're very fun. Some of them take 600 film, which you can get, and some are SX70. This one right here is SX70 film. That one's a little bit pricier, but they're still very cool cameras. They make great display pieces. This one actually doesn't work. That's just a problem with some of the Polaroids, is that since they are made out of plastic, when Polaroid made them way back, they didn't necessarily expect them to be popular 40 years later, so they weren't really making them to last. So sometimes that could be a problem when you're buying Polaroids and there's really no way to tell if it's going to work or not. But regardless, they still make really great display pieces. And there's modern versions of these as well, like the Instatax. Those are smaller film, but they still make them today, so you know you're getting it brand new. And yeah, these are very similar to point and shoots. You're not adjusting anything, you're just taking your picture. And the best part about this is you don't have to get it developed. It just comes right out. You have it right in front of you. And then from there, so we start getting into more fancy cameras. We have a SLR here. This is basically, SLRs are what you think of when you think of a camera. That would be this. It would be an SLR. And how you know it's an SLR, it will have these little adjustment knobs here. You're setting all your own techniques and all that. And then the detachable lenses as well. These ones, a little bit fancier, a little bit more advanced, but if you want to learn how to, adjust your shutter speed and your apertures and all that, then that would be a great option for you, especially if you want to get into film, but you don't necessarily want to spend a whole lot of money either. Some of these can run anywhere from $40. Again, some of them do go up a little bit in the higher price range, but for the most part, these are pretty solid cameras. And one thing to keep in mind too is they're very heavy, a lot of them. A lot of them are very heavy. They were made to last. So, sometimes they might have a bump or a scrape here and there, but for the most part, they're usually fine. Yeah, they are quite heavy, so maybe not perfect for if you're going to go hiking and whatnot, but they're still good. They're good to have. And yeah, a lot of them are 35 millimeter as well, so you can still get film for them. So that's great. And then we have some medium format cameras here. These are like the pro cameras. If you were like a wedding photographer, back in the 70s, you probably had a medium format camera of some sort. So we have two here today. These are like little bricks. They're very heavy, very sturdy. They have the viewfinder up top here, so you can kind of see out this way. But these take 120 film. So these actually do run quite a bit more a lot of the time. They're very popular with camera enthusiasts. So these can run 300. I've seen some go up to like 3,000. It's like buying a digital camera, pretty much like a brand new Canon or something. These are like gold standard for film cameras, and they take amazing photos. But one thing to keep in mind if you are going to buy a medium format camera is that it does take 120 film. So the thing with that is your price for photo actually goes up when you're shooting on medium format. So I have some films here today. So this would be a 35 millimeter here. This is like a 35 millimeter roll. This has 36 photos that you can take onto it. So 36 exposures. This, on the other hand, is a 120 roll. You can see it's quite a bit bigger. The actual photos itself are bigger, but this probably has maybe 16 photos on it. Now, when you go to get it developed, they're going to charge you about the same. It's just what it is. So your price for photo, and also when you buy actually the film, they're about the same price. Sometimes the 120 is actually a little bit more expensive. At least recently, they've been a lot more expensive. But when you go to get this developed, or when you're taking your photos, you have to keep in mind that every photo really matters on this medium format. When you're shooting on 35 millimeter with like a point and shoot, you can have some throwaway photos. You have some wiggle room. With a medium format camera, your wiggle room is not much. It can get up there in price if you're just, you know, kind of shooting willy-nilly with it. You're gonna pay the price for that because it's gonna add up quick. It's not like your iPhone camera. You can take a million photos and it doesn't matter. So that's one thing about the medium format cameras, just to keep in mind if you are gonna go in that direction. Then we have some other cameras too. I won't go too into depth about them, but we do have like some of the old box cameras. These are literally they're like boxes. They make good display pieces. You can't really find the film so much anymore for them. There are ways that you can use specifically 120 film. You can cut it up and do a little Frankenstein project with them if you feel. So if that's something you're into, perfect. I, however, am a little too lazy to be cutting up film in the dark room and all that. So I have these as display pieces personally, but one thing is that Kodak made so many of these, you will run into them everywhere. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these box cameras, specifically Kodak Brownies. Those were the original cameras that Kodak made, were Kodak Brownies. So they made a lot of them. They were very popular. That was the first, as you can say, poor man's camera. You know, before, to get pictures, you'd have to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars, or thousands even, to get a portrait of yourself or your family member. It was a very prestigious thing, something that only rich people had, essentially. When these box cameras came out, it really became the poor man's camera because I could afford it and be able to take pictures as I please. So they did make a lot of these. They're very popular and they're cute. Some of them have very intricate designs on the front, but yeah, they're like just little cute cameras. We also have these ones here. These are called accordion cameras, where they have the little pop out. They're very, very fun to look at. They could be medium format or even large format. If you think medium format's expensive, large format is very pricey. And it is more studio portraits and all that would be for large format. But yeah, these make great display pieces. These can be functional as well. Just depends how much time you're willing to put into them. And yeah, that's it really for those. Those are the main ones you're going to run into out in the wild. So once you actually get your camera, obviously you're going to have to get film for it. And that's always a roadblock that I hear for people, is that they don't even know that film is sold anymore. Because before, you could go to Walgreens or Walmart and just buy rolls of film. It's not necessarily like that anymore. You could actually find some of the 35 millimeters at Walmart, for example. It's not the best quality film per se, but it does the job. We have a camera store here in town up the street. It's called B&C Camera. They have a whole wall of film. So they have a ton of options there. You can get them online as well. Only problem with getting it online is you have to be a little bit picky about where you're getting it from. If you're getting some film from Amazon, that film may have been sitting for a while and you don't really know what conditions they were storing that film in. So with film, you really want it stored somewhere dry, somewhere on the cooler side. Sometimes when you buy from Amazon, it might have been sitting in the truck for a while. It might have been in the warehouse for a while. It might have gotten wet or anything like that, which isn't ideal. It's not the best. You definitely can get film from Amazon stuff. I just don't recommend it personally. I think just going to your local camera store would be best. Or even the local camera store here specifically, they also sell online. So at least you know you're getting it from somewhere that is getting it straight from a manufacturer. So that's something just to keep in mind. And then when you go to buy film, there's going to be a bunch of numbers everywhere. You're going to look at the wall, and it's not just going to be like, can I get 35 millimeter film? Because there's different types of film. There's different filters on film. There's different ISO numbers. So when you go into the store, you're going to see a wall here of 35 millimeter and then a wall of 120. When you get there, you're going to have an idea of what you want to take pictures of. So for example, if I know I'm going camping and I want to take pictures of the stars, for the ISO, so the ISO is basically just how light sensitive that film is going to be. So if I know I'm going to be somewhere very dark where there's not going to be a lot of light and any little glimpse of light I need to capture, then I'm going to need a very high ISO. So we'd say like 1200. I think 800 is actually considered technically high. But so that film is not as resistant to light as, let's say, a 100 ISO film. So if you're going to shoot somewhere that's very sunny, you're going to go to the park at noon and the sun's going to be beating down, you probably want an ISO of like 100 instead, because how light sensitive that film is pretty important, because you don't want your pictures to all come out super overexposed, because then you just wasted a roll. So that's something to keep in mind. And then, yeah, you'll definitely need to know if you want 35 millimeter or 120. And the way you know that, what I do is if I'm buying a camera and I am not sure, especially when I was first starting out, I wasn't sure how to tell the difference between 35 and 120. I would look up manuals online if the manual didn't come with it already. So we have this one here today that actually does have the manual with it still, which is always nice to have. But they don't always have it. Majority of the time, cameras don't have the manuals with it, but a lot of them are archived online. So if you just look up that camera and then manual, you can find PDFs online of all the manuals. So that's a really easy way to figure out if it's going to be 35 or some other. Sometimes there's older films, there's like 220 film and all that. But that's one way to figure it out. I also just kind of based it off the size. Like I know an SLR camera like this is pretty much always going to be 35 millimeter, just based on the size. Because again, as you can see, the 120 film versus the 35 millimeter film has quite a bit of difference on it. This one's definitely got a lot more height on there. So you know that this film isn't necessarily going to fit in here because it takes the whole body of the camera here. So that's just something that you can look at there. And then when I'm buying cameras, another thing, so when you're shooting film, you don't want that film to get exposed to light at all. That was like the first mistake I made. I got my first film camera. I loaded the film in, went shooting, and then I opened the back on it and wiped out all that film. It was all a waste. So sometimes with these cameras is that the camera itself looks very sound, but light can still get into it somehow. So sometimes you have a loose screw at the base, because these have little tiny screws here. Sometimes you have a loose screw and the base is coming off. Or sometimes someone dropped it and there's a big dent in here that could be going to the point where it's inside the camera. So I usually just investigate the body a little bit, making sure there's no obvious ways for light to get in. However, sometimes you can buy a camera, you take pictures on it, and you get streaks of light in every single photo. That indicates that you do have a light leak somewhere in the camera, which can sometimes be a really hard time to figure out. But there are some cushions inside the camera here, and I don't have one that's all taken apart, but there are some cushions that you can replace. Sometimes that'll help. But when I'm buying cameras, for the most part, I look at the whole body, make sure there's no obvious holes or really deep dents in the camera, just to make sure that I have the best chances of it not having a light leak. But sometimes it can be an easy fix. Even if I see a missing screw or something at the bottom, I might still purchase it anyways, because I could just replace the screw and make sure it's all nice and tight in there, because I really do not want light in that camera at all whatsoever. Yeah, and so just some basics on how to use a camera. So if you're not opting in for a point and shoot, like you want to get a little bit more artsy with it, you might opt in for an SLR here, like an actual camera. And when you first get it, it's a little bit different than a digital camera in that a lot of them do not have automatic settings. Don't get me wrong, some of them do. Some of them do have auto settings, but a lot of them do not. So you do kind of need to know how to use a camera and what goes into taking a picture. So when I put in a roll of film, so for example, I have this film today. This has a 800 ISO on it. So when I get the camera, the first thing I'm going to do, there's a dial up here, and that's going to be set your ISO. So that dial, you want to make sure you put it on the correct setting for what film you have. because the camera will try to help you out a little bit and kind of judge if your photo is going to come out good or not. Because when you look through the viewfinder here, there's actually a meter. It's a light meter, which they don't always work, but most of the time they work. And based on whatever settings you have on this camera and whatever you told the camera film that you have, it'll base if it thinks it's going to be a good photo or if it's going to be like an overexposed or a underexposed photo. So after I set that ISO here, so I would set it to 800 in this case. When I actually want to go and take a photo, what I do personally, and this is different for everyone, but what I do personally is I change the aperture setting first. So what your aperture is essentially how big the hole on your camera is going to be. So this lens has a hole inside that you can change the size of. Based on how big or small you have that hole is going to be how much light is going to come into the camera when that shutter goes off. So it might open a little bit or it might open a lot based on how much you tell it to. So a confusing thing sometimes on when you're first learning or setting your aperture is that you have to think of it like fractions. So on this lens here, it says 2.8 all the way up to 16. So you would think 16, okay, that's the biggest you can, that's the most light that's going to come into the camera would be at 16, but that's not the case. It's a fraction essentially. So 16 would actually be your smallest. So 16 would be good for a really, really bright setting, let's say. I bought 800 ISO. I didn't realize I was going to take my camera out midday to take a picture of my friend. I might set it to 16 if I know it's going to be very bright out. Versus this one has 2.8 on it. 2.8 might be if I need my lens open very large because it's very dark out. And there's some other things that go into aperture as well, but that's, I feel like when you're starting at a more basic level, that would be like a good way to start getting an idea of what you need to set your cameras at. And then once you have that set, you also have a shutter speed dial. So your shutter speed is how fast that camera is going to open and close to take the photo. So there's a few things to think about when you're setting your shutter speed. Again, part of it is light. If you want a lot of light to come in, you might want your camera to be open for a longer amount of time when that shutter goes off. But something to think about when you do that is motion. So if my camera is going to be open for 2 seconds, to us 2 seconds doesn't sound long, but 2 seconds on a camera is a very long time. If you don't have a tripod and you set your camera to the shutter speed to 2 and you're just holding it, your photo is going to come out like all wonky, all motiony, because 2 seconds is quite a lot of time for a camera to be open. So there are some like higher shutter speeds. The highest one on this one specifically is 4,000. So that would be very quicker than we can even think about. That would be good for if someone is running, for example, you want to take a picture at a soccer game, but you want it to be a still photo. 4,000 would be probably your best option if possible. But once I get an idea of what I'm going to set my camera at, the aperture and the shutter speed, when I look through this viewfinder, the camera will tell me if I made the right decision. It'll show, there's a little meter, it'll show if it's all the way up here, then my photo's too overexposed. It's going to come out white. There's too much light coming into the camera. So then I can adjust and say, okay, maybe I should decrease my shutter speed, or maybe I need to change the aperture a little bit and the shutter speed together. And once it's in the middle, then you know you're good, or at least close to the middle. But it could also be all the way down to the bottom, which means that would be underexposed, meaning that I would need to change the shutter speed or the aperture once again, because the photo is going to come out essentially too dark. It's going to be all blacked out. So that's at least the good part about film, is that the camera does help you a little bit to tell you, hey, I don't think this is a good idea. Sometimes when you buy these cameras though, the exposure meter, the light meter, doesn't always work. Sometimes that's just a battery issue. These do have batteries on them. You know, they're not digital. They have batteries. That mostly controls the light meter for the most part. So you might need to replace the batteries. If not, then it might just be jammed or broken, which is okay. You can still take pictures. What you need to do is you can download apps on your phone. That'd be the easiest option, would be to download an app on your phone for the exposure meter. I have one of those on my phone, and it just kind of gives you an idea based on what your iPhone camera sees, what your settings should be theoretically. It's not perfect, but it does the job. There's also light meters that you can buy. They're like little boxes, and those can also work as well. Those can be a little bit more complicated to use sometimes if you've never seen one before, but it's a good option as well. And I think that is pretty much all that I had. It was a lot of information, but if you guys have any questions, yeah.
Where can you get your film developed?
Yeah, so you can get your film developed. There's a few places in town. I personally go to Pro Image. It's right next to B&C Camera here on Sahara. There's also places you can send your film through the mail. There's a Z Film Lab is one that I've sent my film out to. Believe it or not, I think they might be getting rid of it soon, but Walgreens also develops film still. I don't recommend, but personally, they've lost my film a few times, so, but it is an option if you want convenience. That is a good option to have as well. Yeah.
I was going to add to that, people like CVS will take your film and they send it to a central processing lab, but they will not send your film back. They'll send you digital photos back.
Yeah.
So if you want to go film, that's not a good option. What's happened to me in the past is that since they do ship it off, they ship it to somewhere in Texas, I believe. I don't know if they still do. It's been a while, but they ship it out to Texas, and then I asked for my film bag. I personally requested it to come back to the Walgreens I dropped it off at. Problem is they lost it before it even made it to Texas. So that happened about like 2 or 3 times to me personally. So that is something to keep in mind. Your film might get lost. So if you have pictures of your newborn baby, probably not a good idea to send it through there. But if you have some throwaway photos, not a terrible idea. But yeah, there's a place right up the street here that does it. So yeah. Yeah. Any other questions?
Do you know about like buying chemicals to develop your own film?
Ooh.
Around anywhere?
Yeah, it is online mostly. I don't develop my own film personally. It's a lot. You need your own dark room and all that. But yeah, you can buy chemicals and stuff online. And then you can even find some of the trays and whatnot to develop your film and the lights and all that. A lot of the time you could find that secondhand. A lot of people have them still, especially universities. A lot of them still have dark rooms. And when they clear out their dark rooms, they just kind of give it away because, they're remodeling. They don't really care much about it anymore. So yeah, that's another place you can get stuff secondhand if you need all the equipment and whatnot. Yeah, and then we actually even have a film photo booth here that actually develops the photos right inside there. But that is film, that is chemicals, all of that. So that's, definitely something you can still get your hands on for sure. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes?
Are there any kind of brands that you would recommend depending upon what decade the camera comes from?
Ooh, yes. So Canon's always a good option. They have a lot of the SLRs here. My personal favorite is Minolta. It's not a common one that people really like, but my personal Minolta has always been very good to me and very sturdy. So I use that one a lot. Pentax is another one, especially medium format. I have a Pentax for one of those. And these right here, these are fantastic. Pretty much gold standard too for medium format. Yeah.
It's going to be that much more complicated to operate medium format versus
Yeah.
the SLR. You've got to do a lot more with the light. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's a very similar function to the SLRs. The main difference is, again, you have to make sure you do know what you're doing, or else you're going to be wasting a lot of money. But for the most part, the functions are pretty much the same. You're still setting your aperture and all that. These ones, though, I feel like a little bit more goes into the setup, just because you're
thinking in the back of your head, I don't want to waste a photo on here because it's going to make me very sad if I do. So, but yeah, these ones could be a little bit more complicated too in the sense of actually loading the film because, you know, these ones, you kind of just pull the roll out and, you know, shoot a couple times. These ones, you have to have 2 spoolies. So you have to have this spoolie here. And when this roll is done, you have to make sure you don't throw this away because you're going to need it for the next one because it's a 2 spoolie system. It pulls it this way. So that's another thing that sometimes when you first start, you forget that you need that other spoolie because you're used to throwing them away. But yeah.
Because they just, to add to that, your medium format cameras don't tend to have the automatic features on them that are built into the SLRs. And so if you know your relationships between your f-stops and your speed, how they work in opposite directions, and then it just comes with experience. You're gonna burn a lot of film trying to figure out how those relationships work. The SLR is good to learn on because you can meter it and confirm what your settings are before you push the trigger.
Yeah. Anything else? No? Okay, well, we have all of these up here. These are pretty much all for sale, minus this and these 2 right here. But everything else, if you want to check them out, grab them, feel them. You can feel how heavy some of these are, especially these medium format ones are pretty heavy. Yeah.
When you're in the store and you're looking at some of the older cameras here, are there any telltale signs to be able to determine whether or not this camera's going to function properly or not, just without the film in there that we can test out?
Yeah, so if I'm looking specifically at like an SLR, I will usually try it. Hopefully the battery is good and all that. I usually check the light meter first. I'll point it at the ceiling, point it at the floor, see if the light meter is moving at all. If it doesn't, sometimes that's just because the battery's dead. Sometimes it's because it's jammed. So you have to keep that in the back of your head is if you're willing to not have a light meter. And then I also look for if the shutter goes off. I look for if the shutter goes off. I think this one might be a little jammed, but I cock it as if there's film in here, and then I hit the shutter here. So I'll do that a few times. I'll go through all the shutter speeds and see if it's actually shooting. What else? For the point and shoots, it's kind of hard if it doesn't have a battery in it already. There's really no way to know. Sometimes the point and shoots also will not actually let you shoot if there's no film in it. So that's something to keep in mind. Polaroids are very difficult in that Polaroid film actually contains the battery pack with it. So if there's no Polaroid film in the camera, it's not going to work because there's no battery in it either. That's why I mentioned earlier, you know, these were not necessarily made to last forever because Polaroid didn't think they needed to last forever. And, you know, they pushed them out so quickly and, you know, there's problems with them. But if you could get one, I know there's a lot here. I think there was one I had today, but, oh, this one here. This one here, it actually was tested. It says works on the tag. So that's something I would look for if I'm buying a Polaroid. If not, just test my luck, I guess. Sometimes if they've just been sitting, they might become jammed over time. It's hard to tell. But yeah.
There are published price guides on the cameras so you can look things up.
You know, I don't usually use the price guides per se. Normally, I'm in a lot of camera groups on Facebook. There's a lot of analog film camera, like that's literally what the name is called, analog film camera club or group. So I usually look in there to see what people are selling and for how much. Sometimes I'll check eBay as well if I want to make sure I'm getting a good price for something. But yeah, from my knowledge, there's not really too many guides out there really anymore, just because the prices change so quickly based on popularity that those guides become very dated very quickly. So especially now with social media, I mean, these little digital point and shoots were going for like $5, maybe if you were lucky, you could buy it for $5. But now, I mean, some of them go up to $200 just because the demand is there now. Whereas, you know, 10 years ago, no one wanted this. They wanted the brand new Canon DSLR. But now it's very popular on TikTok to have like a digital camera. So yeah, it changes so quickly based on what people are into at the moment. So yeah. Anything else? No?
One last question.
Yeah,
The lenses, we sell a lot of lenses here.
we do. We just sell a lot of
So, I mean,
lenses.
obviously we got the camera body. What about,
Mhm.
we have to buy, you know, Minolta, you're gonna have to get Minolta lens, or is there any way, are there universal comms for that?
Yeah.
Guess if you're gonna get one lens, just get one that's
Mhm.
greener or better off getting it wide.
Yeah, lenses are a little complicated. I mean, most of them will have a stock lens. So actually, this is even the stock lens on this. But so obviously, your stock lens is going to fit on it. The only problem is that there are so many different lens body attachment pieces that you kind of have to do your research sometimes if one lens is going to fit in your camera. You can definitely mix around brands though. Sometimes a Minolta lens will work also on a Pentax, depending on what that actual attachment is. But they didn't want you to buy other companies' lenses, so they all kind of have their own lens piece, the attachment piece. I think here, like this one came with some extra lenses on it, so this one is going to fit for this one. This is actually a Nikon lens, so it is going to fit. But you kind of need to know what the mount is for it. They do actually make a conversion mounts. But again, you kind of have to look into it to see if that mount has a conversion for this camera, because it gets really complicated. There's so many different ones, and even some of the older lenses you can put on a DSLR camera, a modern digital camera. But again, you either need that conversion piece or you need to know that the mounts are the same or compatible. So yeah, it can get a little complicated sometimes. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Thank you.